And then the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that information, I got sent back. But that is really what has activated my life path and created the understanding of how we are impacted by our ancestors in our current life, and why it's so important to create healing for yourself. Because when you create healing for yourself, you not only heal yourself, but you heal everybody that you're connected to, and that includes the people in the spirit world.
To a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcasts are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Welcome to Broaderlands podcast. I'm so excited to have you on because I always say science without spirituality is incomplete, and spirituality without science is ignorance.
I love it. Pretty true, right? Absolutely.
Better to have on.
We're at the point now, I think, where we're starting to integrate it, and we can see how, the spiritualists and the scientists are sort of coming together.
Isn't that a beautiful thing to watch?
It's amazing. It's fascinating. It's like science is finally catching up, but all the spiritual people have known for thousands of years. But now we get science to start backing that up.
I asked Eben Alexander this, and I asked him, first of all, before I ask this question, I'm going to ask you, how would you define a near-death experience at a scientific level and at a spiritual level to someone that never heard of a near-death experience?
Right, because I was a complete atheist, so I understand what you're saying. The scientific and the spiritual is going to merge at that point, because when you leave your body, you realize the first thing I realized was that I was still me, but I was outside my body. And I had absolutely no belief system in that you survive death, that there is any kind of religion or a God or a source or anything like that. Angels, I did not believe in anything that had to do with spirituality. I was completely scientific. So I think at that point that's where it meets, right? The science and the spirituality, because we now have science that can start to explain these different kinds of phenomena. They're doing a lot of research. Like you mentioned Eben Alexander, who was in a coma, with meningitis, and they could still track that there was brain function, even though he had brain function, even though when they were tracking it, it showed no brain function. But then he still came back and told the story. And it just shows that, we I'm going to say our consciousness and consciousness studies now, the way I look at it is your consciousness is like the iPhone or the computer. What do we do with our phone and our computer? We back everything up to the cloud. So when you go and get a new cell phone, you go to the store and then they just hit a button and it's like it downloads all your information that sits in the cloud. But we're not that different. Our brain and our consciousness is literally sitting in the cloud, and our brain is like that chip in your phone and computer that is processing that information that you're downloading from the cloud. So that is what I have come to, that's how I look at it. It's like where science meets spirituality.
I love that. Thank you. I've heard it said that you're the most integrative and ancestral healer of our time because you have that medical knowledge, that scientific understanding, and you had two near-death experiences, which brings us into the spiritual, right? Mm-hmm. A spiritual lens. It's an honor to have you. And I know someone that's a trauma family therapist in Arizona that doesn't believe in ancestral trauma or generational trauma, and he says that's a cop-out. And I'm like, wow, he doesn't even know about epigenetics.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to maybe share a little bit about epigenetics and ancestral and generational trauma and how it all works, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's actually a really fascinating topic, and I work a lot with this. It's become I'm going to say my destiny in life is to create healing for people through guiding them through their ancestral trauma. So let's start with the genetics, because you mentioned the genetics. We know scientifically that you pass down trauma on the DNA. We already have the research proving that. And we can see they're doing research on the Holocaust survivors, and they can see that that trauma is passed down to the grandchildren. And they can see that because there's certain genes like the FKBP5 gene that was one of the first one I think that came out, and they can see that trauma is passed down. But they also did, there's a fascinating study, which is probably the best study yet that sort of explains this. And that study is called Epigenetic Inheritance of Ancestral Odor Fear Conditioning. And it's a study that was done back in 2013. And it was led by Brian Diaz at the Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. And what they did is they took mice, male mice, and they exposed them to like a cherry blossom smell. And every time they smelled that cherry blossom, they would give them a little electric shock. So, of course, the mice learned to fear the cherry blossom smell because they knew they were going to get a little electric shock. Well, then they took the sperm from the male mice, artificially inseminated the female mice, so the mice never actually met. And that female mice then gave birth to little mice pups. And the mice pups were more jumpy and more, scared of the cherry blossom smell than other pups because that had been passed down from the male mice sperm to the female mice. And so those mice came in with more jumpiness. And there's something called an M71 receptor that they measured this. And what they found is that the male mice developed more M71 receptors because they feared that smell. But that was also passed down. And that baby mice developed more M71 receptors so that they could detect the smell, the cherry blossom smell, at an even lower level. So, and that's a great study that shows, we do a lot of mice studies, but they're also doing studies on humans and how the genes are being passed down. So the trauma that happens to our ancestors, we think all of our great grandparents pretty much fought a war somewhere. Great grandparents were all in World War II, right? And so we know that all those experiences are passed down to the following generations. So, but then we also, I'm going to say, via quantum physics and our lived experiences and the way we are raised in certain families, we know that trauma gets passed down through the generation and we repeat certain patterns. So, but a lot of that comes from the ancestors and the way, whatever it is that they couldn't resolve, the issues they had, they weren't happily married, they were married to an alcoholic, there were lots of issues in the family. And what you see often is there is a repetition, at least with some of those kids that repeat those patterns. And that is an ancestral pattern that gets passed down. So when you look at the issues that you're struggling with on an everyday basis, and some common ones would be, relationships are always a common pattern. And miscommunication or not lack of communication within families, and people saying, I haven't spoken to my mother for, the last 7 years, and I haven't spoken to my son in the last 5 years, right? This cut-off communication patterns are also very common. And when you start looking at it, you can actually heal it. So when I work with people, I have had many clients that we go through, the client is the only one that's doing the healing. And we go through, we talk about the issues, talk about how they came to the world, what was the family like. We try to figure out why is it that this pattern is a struggle in this family. And then we do a healing at the end where I call in the spirit world and we create healing. I'm going to say there's that quantum entanglement via physics. And invariably, 2 weeks later, I get an email saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much for the healing. And guess who called? My son called me out of the blue, yesterday. It's been 2 weeks since we did the healing. Nobody knows that I did this healing or I did this work. But those people, those loved ones are still picking up on something, right? In the field, something changed. And what changed was that person created healing for themselves, because what I learned through my near-death experiences is that we are all connected, right? And we can see that now. We can see it via quantum physics, and the quantum science is coming along backing this up. We're all connected to each other, and what we do to ourselves and how we heal affects those around us, because we create healing. And I'm going to say if I could measure the frequency or something, I bet there's something that changes within us, like the frequency or something, but we're connected to all our loved ones. They feel that something has changed. And I have many stories like that where only that one person is doing the healing, but the family around them is shifting.
I love that. Thank you. I got sober in 2009, and I remember one time I was over here in Arizona at an AA meeting, and I heard an old timer saying, "Yeah, it's in their genes," and he was pointing to the Navajo that were in the
Yeah.
meeting, a group of Navajo people, and I have Native American
Mhm.
myself, and I said, "No, it's not the genes, it's the collective, generational trauma that they've
Mhm.
experienced and never got to heal from." And
Yes.
he looked at me like I was dumb. And Gabor Mate talks about this, Lance Dodds and many other great doctors,
Mhm.
that there's no, alcoholic gene, there's no addiction gene.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, Gabor even goes further, and he says, "Not only is there no alcoholic or addiction gene, there can't be one." But
Yes.
we have to look at our upbringing, right? And what
Yes.
created this perfect storm called addiction?
Yes. Absolutely. I love Gabor Mate. And his, I think, called Hungry Ghosts or something, that book about
Yeah.
addiction. Yeah, it's a great book. And he always brings a different viewpoint um, to the table. So I love the way he teaches the people how to look at things differently, not the way we're necessarily taught in medical school or right growing up. Um, but it's absolutely because how we are raised and how we interact, we learn that ancestrally, we learned it as a toddler. When you're little, right? If the ice cream truck is on your street and you're like 3 years old, 4 years old, you know intuitively whether you are going to ask for ice cream or not. Because if mom is in a good mood, you're like, we have a chance today. We might get ice cream. She's in a good mood. But if you know that mom is not in a good mood, you're not going to even go there because you know she might just yell or scream at you, right? But you tune into that as a toddler, and we tune into so much more when we're
Mm,
young, and we're like little sponges that say, "Don't worry, mom, I got this. I'm going to help you." Right? And we take on, information subconsciously that we see them struggle with, and then we kind of repeat those patterns.
wow. Have you ever been to Hertz Museum in, Phoenix, Arizona?
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, and then you see that collective trauma, what
Yeah.
happened, and it's like, wow, and how that still affects us to this day. How do
Yes.
we heal as a collective?
I'm going to say each person steps up to the
Mm,
plate and starts to create healing because we're all connected. So when you create healing and all you really have to do is focus on yourself. You cannot make other people heal, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't
yeah.
make him drink. And it's couldn't be more true. But you can work on yourself. You can create healing for yourself because you are connected to everything else. You're connected to everybody else, and they're going to feel that radiate from you. And I had one client that said, they came from a dysfunctional family. She also had a brother, and I worked with a woman, and we did a healing. And 2 weeks later, they had a get together, and she emailed me and she said, my brother, nobody knows that I did this healing, and I did the ancestral healing with you. And my brother came and he said, I can see a shift in you. I can feel it. Something changed. I can see how you are healing. And that is making me want to go to counseling. So I'm going to start going to counseling. Right? It gives you goosebumps because
Mm,
no, she didn't tell anyone. But she said they somehow felt it, that I had healed. And that allowed her brother to start going to counseling. Ancestral healing was probably not the right thing for him. He needed a different kind of therapy. So again, we pick up on that, what we feel from other people. So to heal your own ancestral trauma and to heal the collective, you need to heal yourself first. Just focus on yourself and heal yourself. And as you heal, you change and you become different because you awaken to that. Your consciousness elevates because you are now creating an awareness of why it is that you were struggling with certain things. And then you heal that, right? And then you raise your consciousness, but you're connected to everything else. So it helps raise everybody else's consciousness and create awareness and create healing for them.
Thank you. I was just going to ask you that. When we heal, how does part of the world heal? But you just answered it, so I appreciate
Yes,
it.
exactly. One person at a time. That's my motto. It's the one person at a time, because the more people that heal, that spreads. That person, we each know 100 people or 1,000 people, but for every person that heals and does healing for themselves, it spreads to everybody else.
There was a Swami that once said, your own self-realization is the greatest service you can give to the world. And I
Mhm.
truly believe that.
Yeah.
How do you define trauma?
Trauma, well, we know what Gabor says.
Yeah,
Gabor, I love what he says, because he
me
says,
too.
this thing that happens to you, right? The trauma happens to you, but it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you that changes you. So when you look at trauma, right? It could be anything, because trauma is something that is unpleasant that somebody is experiencing. And it could be anything, right? What is trauma to you might not be trauma to me,
Yeah.
right? So it's different for every person what that trauma is. And we can't say this person's trauma was worse than that person's trauma. Well, in your opinion, because that's like saying, everybody has struggles in their life. And why is it that my struggles are so much more difficult than everybody else's? But that's not true, because the other people's struggles look easy to you because they wouldn't be hard for you to resolve those struggles, right? And vice versa. So trauma could be anything, an unpleasant experience for anybody.
I say the same thing, and I started to say this in the 12-step community, because usually if some people don't get the program, they kind of get shamed or blamed that they're not ready to, they're not honest. But for one, we're
Mhm.
not talking about trauma, we're bypassing stuff.
Yeah.
And what's traumatizing for me may not be traumatizing for you, and vice versa. The same thing with
Mhm.
the solution. It can't be black and white. We have to
Yes.
use our intuition to help someone. As far as when you look at the 12 steps, I need to get into step 11 before step 12, which is really
Mhm.
utilizing my intuition and
Yeah.
not get into black and white sponsorship, dogmatic sponsorship. I call it
Mhm.
conscious sponsorship,
Mhm.
helping somebody. But I love that, and I love how you define trauma. But I've also heard you use Gabor's, and you made me think. I was like, wow, that was a great explanation on
Mhm.
how you define an awakening. Because you, like
Mhm.
myself, say, oh, NDEs are another form of awakening. And
Yeah.
then you use the term with Gabor's saying on trauma, what happens inside of you, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of it's not so much what happened to you, the near death experience or
Mhm.
suffering, and finally awaken from my alcoholism, and it
Mhm.
the outcome's the same. We have a whole shift in the worldview and consciousness, and we're more
Mhm.
heart centered and living more in oneness versus an unhealthy dualistic way of living or unconscious way of living. Is just a
Mhm.
complete change. I know for me, I was just yeah, it's a total shift in consciousness.
Yeah, no, it's exactly, when we listen to people's near death experiences, and we probably will get to mine during this interview.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get so fascinated with what they saw, what they experienced, right? We forget everything that actually shifted in that person. What happened to that person afterwards, right? And it's the same thing again, like Gabor said. It's not what happened to you, like I bled to death in the ER. It's not what happened to you. It's what happens inside of you as a
Mm,
result of what happened to me, right? And how that created a complete shift in who I am, and my whole belief system took a 180-degree turn. So because I didn't believe in anything, right, before my near-death experiences, you die, it's black, that's it, you're gone. And that was the end of story for me. And if I hadn't had these experiences, I totally understand people who look at me or look at other people that tell these stories of their near-death experiences. Oh, that must be a hallucination. That can't happen, right? But we know that it's not a hallucination. We know that from stories like Eben Alexander's. We know that this is something real that happens, and how, our spirit lives on, or our soul. We just step out of the body. But we also know that I know that from working as an evidential medium, right? And contacting the spirit world, the bringing loved ones, and how the loved ones always know what we're doing, even though I don't know anything about the person I'm doing a reading for, right? Same thing when I work as a medical intuitive. I get information. I know things about them. Even if the person on my screen is saying, I really wanted to see you. I have all these food allergies and I want you to help me, sort those out. And I'm getting a completely different diagnosis from the spirit world. And I said, I keep hearing this diagnosis. Did anyone ever tell you that you have this? Oh yeah, I had surgery for that like 15 years ago. I'm like, okay, well, there it is. It's still there. And this is what's driving that inflammation, which is driving your food allergies, right? So we got to go back to, the basics, and then say, okay, who did the surgery? Oh, they had that kind of surgery. That's the wrong surgery. You need this kind of surgery. So it's interesting, because I also feel we are so divinely guided, right? So people who see me on a podcast, typically, and then there's something that clicks, and they often say, I had to stop the video and I had to go schedule a session with you. I had to learn more about you. There's something that clicks, that says this person holds information, right? And that's why I say there's never a competition between you and other people that have the same skill set, because I'm a medical intuitive or a medical medium, and there's gazillion other people that are too. But the people who are drawn to me, there is a reason I hold some information that they need. And if they're drawn to somebody else, that person holds some information for them, right? I'm going to say, this is that divine guidance that we experience, and we're drawn to certain people, and we don't often know why. But it always turns out that I will know about some weird thing we didn't even learn about in medical school that this person has. And I'm holding that information, and then I can say, I know what it is. This is the doctor you need. What state are you in? And I've even had people like across the ocean. I had somebody in Romania once, and I said, I know exactly what it is. It's this. And there's one doctor in Romania that can do the surgery, and they lived in that city. I mean, how crazy is that I would know about that one doctor in a foreign country? I mean, it's so divinely guided sometimes that even makes me say, wow, it's amazing, because we have so much more. We are capable of so much more, right? We're all intuitive creatures, but we just have forgotten how to use it. And then some of us are supposed to be here to work with it, like myself. And you're here to bring this, via podcast and all the work you're doing, right? And so we kind of incarnated to help get this to the people. And everybody has a reason why they're here. Everybody has intuition, just like everybody can sing happy birthday. Some people will sing it beautifully, on tune. Everybody can sing, but everybody's not supposed to be a famous singer and stand on stage and sing, but we can all sing. And it's the same thing with intuition and connecting with the spirit world. We all have that ability. We all have that within us. We are human creatures on the planet Earth. But we're not all here to work with it, but we can all use it, and we can all learn to use it better. And we can all become more intuitive by fine-tuning our faculties.
I love that. Thank you. What's interesting is, I don't know if you're familiar with Elaine Pagels, Professor Elaine Pagels. She helped translate the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospels that weren't put in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But I was telling her, it's just amazing how, like, you hear scriptures and then they have different meanings. I don't think there's not one set meaning. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you talked about how you had a painful near-death experience, but it led into an awakening. But you're in the hospital, right? And I'm suffering from alcoholism and losing everything worthwhile in life that gave me a sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny part is, like that saying Carl Jung, there's no coming to consciousness without pain. And so
Yeah.
you can explain it in a different way, and I can explain it in my own different way. And the reason why I'm saying this, because you hear all these different labels and terms like spiritual, transformative
Hmm.
experience, but a real awakening is a death. There is some kind
Hmm.
of death. There's like a spiritual death that I experienced.
Hmm.
But it all leads to the same outcome, right? We're more heart
Yes.
centered and more in tune with our connectedness.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna say absolutely. It's like an initiation in shamanism, right? You
yeah.
got to go through the mud. Like I say, you got to walk through the muddy field. There is a sunny, dry road on the other side, but we all have to go through hard things in life. Everybody has hardships. There is no such thing as nobody has hardships, right? Even the people you think don't have hardships, they have hardships.
Mm,
Um, but that is an awakening, and I'm going to say, depending on what we're here to do, we go through different kinds of awakenings. So I feel, some people have what I call a resting life, but things are just running smoothly. Right? There's no big bumps in the road of, a lot of trauma or sickness, illness, death, right? And it's kind of more of a smooth ride. And I call those people, they're here for a resting life. They had a bumpy life last time, and now they're getting kind of a smoother ride this time. And then other, people like myself, it's been a bumpy road with 2 near-death experiences and sickness, illness. But then, as I went through those years of having bone marrow suppression and barely being able to leave the house for 6 years, and it was pretty terrible. Now looking back, I understand why I had to go through that,
mm,
because that was a whole transition, and that's when all these different things started happening. I became more spiritual. I started hearing the spirit world, and I was really sick, at the time. Um, but that is also the awakening that comes from that. And when you look in my astrological chart, I've had astrologers say, yeah, I can see that. And then you were sick and it took 10 years and then you got well around the age of 44. I was like between 44 and 46. And I'm saying, what? Wait a second. Can you see that in my chart? And they say, yeah, because one astrologer said, yeah, that's when you paid off your past life karma. So, and do you see that? And I see, I used to not think that karma was real, but there's definitely something about the karma that we bring with us, the wrongdoings from other lives. And I'm going to say, so when you look at, if you look at my life, and I was sick for all those years, and I had a near-death experience, which happened on a specific day, which I've also been told it had to happen on July 10th, 1992, because all the planets were in a certain formation that had something to do with my birth. And it was a reminder. I had to have it that day because it had to remind me of why I incarnated into this life. I had to be spiritually woken up so that I could remember that I came to work with people spiritually. And this is what, astrologers tell me that don't know me. And they say, this is what happened on this, specific day. And then you paid off your karma. So while I went through all this, of course, it seemed like, what in the world is going on? I was perfectly healthy just a few weeks ago. I was 34 years old, very super healthy. I had just studied nutrition. I had a degree in nutrition. I was eating healthy. Everything I did, I was doing everything right. So, and then, I get stuck, being sick for barely leaving my house for the next 6 years. But now looking back, you can see why, right?
mm,
Because then I had to be spiritually awoken. I had to start communicating with the spirit world. I had to live through that. But at the same time as I lived through that and I had to be sick myself, so I could then be more empathic towards helping other people. I understand what people are living through because I lived it myself, right?
mm,
You know what it's like to struggle with alcohol because you've done it yourself and how to get out of that, right? So we have these different experiences, but they make sense when you look back. Because now it makes sense that I had to go through that. I paid off my past life karma at the same time as I got the lesson I needed in this life to propel me forward to be that healer for other people
mm,
and to work scientifically and spiritually with people to create healing in their life, right? So I'm here. My incarnation is a healer. I'm a master life path 11 if you look at numerology. So that I'm a master healer, but now all of that makes sense now because now I know why I'm here. I'm here to be that healer. And the same thing for you. You're here. You had to go through those hardships. You came out of those hardships, and you're bringing all this wonderful information to all of your listeners, because that's why you really came, right? Is to bring that healing and the love. But without having had your own hardships, you wouldn't be able to bring it the way you're bringing it.
Mm.
Right? It's like I feel like we all sign up for different things. I'll take number 242 and 365, please, in this life. It's going to be great fun, right? And then we go back to the spirit world at the end and we go, wow, look at that. We did so great. Let's do it again. Okay, I'm going to play this role in the next life. Who do you want to be? I need this lesson now, right? I feel like we just kind of switch the scripts around.
I love that. Thank you. I know I'm not sure if you're familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away a couple years
Yeah.
back. He was a Zen
Mm-hmm.
master,
Yeah.
but he talked about no mud, no lotus, and you just described it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the importance of the two, right?
Yeah.
I always say I went from being a lousy dope dealer to a pretty good hope dealer. And
Yeah.
I love the word hope, help other people evolve by just having a podcast and help bring in great minds like yourself, minds and hearts, and really help create a broader perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on. Before we get into your near-death experiences, do you believe we can bring in, because I can't ask a mainstream doctor this, can we bring in past life trauma?
Into this life?
Yeah.
Like almost like karma
Yeah.
or things yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
think that the way I look at it is all the things that you experience in this life. I call it the seed bag. You put it, like you collect everything, you put it in your little bag, and then you're done with this life. But everything you learned is in your seed bag, and everything you learned in your past lives is in this bag. And you go back to source, and then you say, okay, let's do it again. I want to learn this in this next life. Or maybe they give you assignments sometimes, who knows? So maybe sometimes we choose and sometimes we're assigned things. But all those seeds of knowledge that you collected in all your lives is what you also bring with you, right, into the next life. But it's not like you have complete awareness of it, right? So you still have that, you know how we say, oh, that child is an old soul, right? What is it that makes us say that? We see something in those kids, something in their eyes, the way they behave, right? There's some wisdom that's coming through. We know that kid has walked the earth many times. And then we know somebody else is a younger soul. I'm going to say it's fascinating because I think we bring it with us, and we know that from, being regressed or having memories of past lives that are just coming to us, and then we realize it's true. And there's lots of research that has been done. Oh my gosh, probably for like 60, 70 years, we've been doing research on past lives. So we know that children often remember their past life and have given detailed descriptions of villages and where they lived and who they were, what family they were part of, and how they died and who murdered them, and etc. Right? We know that, and so we know that the soul recycles, but we don't. It's not readily available. It's like that information is sort of hidden, unless we get regressed, unless we have random memories that come to us through meditation or other, in dreams or other ways.
Do you believe we live one life at a time, or are we living multiple lives all at once?
That's a great question. So, because in my first near-death experience, I knew that there was no time. Time is only something that exists when I'm in my physical body. And when I was outside my body in the ER, I knew that I had access to past, present, and future all at the same time. There was no time. It drove me crazy for years. Because I was like, what is that? Why is there no time? And I was trying to find physics books and, what is time? Explain this. How can this be? How can I have thought that there is no time? But we also, now people talk about fractals and, you have a piece of your soul in this body and a piece of your soul in some other body. Could we all be living simultaneous lives at the same time? I think it's absolutely possible. Is it also possible to live just one life? I think that's possible too. So I don't know. Maybe there's a choice. Maybe some of us have incarnated into several bodies at the same time. Maybe we all are, or maybe we live it one at a time. I think I don't know what the physicists say or other people, but I think that both are definitely a possibility because of that experience I had with time, that there is no time on the other side. There is something magical about time.
That's interesting. I've had some experiences outside of my body. When I was a kid, I used to have all these um astral travel, when I was
Yeah.
dreams and stuff when I was a kid all the time, but now I don't have those. But I've had a couple experiences. One time I was in Ohio working in the woods, and all of a sudden I looked through a flower when I was urinating in the
Yeah.
woods, and I slipped out of my body where I was like I like I was like in a pure state of consciousness where I didn't have any personality. It was just like I absorbed into the allness of life, like this pure
Yes.
presence. But then
Hmm.
I had another experience where I was when my dad passed away, I was looking at everything, but I still had all the worldly labels. Okay, that's a
Hmm.
fire truck. Those are the firemen running down to get us. The police officers, I could see the people overlooking the cliff where my dad died. He fell off. I
Hmm.
seen me and my uncle holding my dad, and but so I was still had the labels, but there's been that other time where I had no personality, no
Hmm.
worldly, no labels, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to say that's like an out of body experience, because even though that's you down there, it's like you're detached.
Mm.
You're detached from it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Hmm.
Do you believe our near death experience, because you had two,
Hmm.
can change your epigenetics?
Yes, because any kind of trauma can change your epigenetics, and near death experience is trauma in number one, because typically something is going on with you that you end up almost, being half dead or almost dead, right? It's typically you're in an accident or illness or something that happens. So I'm going to say most of the time you're going to have trauma associated with that near death experience, but we tend to not talk about that because we're so fascinated about the experience itself. Like, what happened? What did you see? Is it true? Are we more than just our body, right? We're all always searching for that answer. And I'm sure some people want to believe that we are more, and some people might be scared by it, right? Depending on where you're at in your own spiritual evolution.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Maybe you can walk us into your near death experiences if you don't mind.
Yeah. So the first one I had happened in 1992 on July 10th. And I had given birth to my third child. And during the birth, we also had an earthquake. So it was a 7.4 earthquake. And then we lost the power in the hospital. And it was one of those moments in my life when I thought I was going to die, because either the big windows were going to cave in or the ceiling tiles were going to bury us in rubble. I mean, the nurses and my husband, everybody was leaning over me so I wouldn't levitate off the birthing bed. And luckily, the earthquake stopped, but we also lost all the power in the hospital. And then I gave birth, and my labor even stopped for half an hour. And then my labor finally restarted. It's like you're running from the lion in the jungle, right? Get yourself to safety, then give birth. And then I gave birth. And then they finally gave me my baby to hold. And I just yelled to my husband, take the baby. Because I was in excruciating pain. I was just arching my backwards. And that was the first time I hemorrhaged. So they massaged my uterus. They put me on IV drip, stayed an extra day in the hospital. And then they said, all right, well, it looks good. So we're going to let you go home. And then on July 8th, like about 2 weeks later, my friends were having a baby shower for me because I had given birth to a girl, and I had two boys that were 6 and 3.5. So everybody was super excited. Oh, we have to give you all these girl things. So we met at the park, and I go to use the restroom. And this enormous blood clot comes out the size of a baby's head. And I tell my friend, I said, I have to leave. This huge blood clot came out. So I go home, and my parents are visiting and they're helping with the kids. They call my husband. We go to the ER, and now I'm in the ER. They come in, they look and they say, well, it doesn't seem like there's too much blood coming out now. So, we're going to keep you for observation for a couple of hours. And, if you don't bleed again, we'll just send you home. So no lab work, no ultrasound, no imaging, just a manual inspection. So they send me home. Next evening, Thursday evening, it was like 9:00 at night, 9:30, another huge blood clot comes out. So my husband gets on the phone. He calls the hospital. Like, what should we do? And I'm yelling, I'm not going back. Like, they're not going to do anything. I was there yesterday. They didn't do anything. It's pointless. So they said, all right, we're going to set you up to see the doctor tomorrow morning. You're probably not going to bleed anymore tonight. That was kind of a dumb decision in the first place because there's nothing that says you're not going to bleed more. So anyway, the next morning we go to the doctor and he does a manual inspection and he says, well, it could have been, a second lining that came out. So I'm thinking, okay, 2 second linings of from the uterus, and no lab work, no imaging, sends me on my way. Later that day, hemorrhage again, one more huge blood clot. So we say, okay, we have to go back to the hospital. This is the third one in 3 days. So we go back to the ER. They do another visual inspection and they say, well, not much bleeding going on right now, so we're just going to keep you for observation. They close the door. And I don't even have a bell to ring. So I'm lying on this table and I start bleeding. And I'm not thinking much about it. I'm just like, okay, great. I'm finally bleeding in the ER. And the next thing that happened is divine intervention because this nurse came and opened the door to check on me this particular minute, right? Because if she had come 5 minutes later, I might not have been alive. So she checks on me and she can see how much I've been bleeding. So I can hear the call go out on the loudspeaker. OBGYN, stat to the ER. OBGYN, stat to the ER. And she quickly cleans up the paper, puts on some new paper. And within 30 seconds, this middle-aged physician comes running full speed into my room, a younger physician in tow. And he says, what's going on? And I said, I've been bleeding. And, this started on a Wednesday and now it's Friday. He looks in the wastebasket and he can see how bloody the papers are. So he said, all right, let's take a look. So him and the younger physician, again, visual inspection to see, can they see anything? Is something going on? And as they do that inspection, another huge blood clot comes out. So at this point, I try to sit up and say, hey, I'm not feeling too good. But luckily, this physician had probably seen a thing or two because he was middle-aged and he knew exactly what was going on because he knew this was, the 5th time I'm hemorrhaging in 3 days. So he just pushed me down on the table and the table starts tipping. So my head is going towards the floor, my feet goes towards the ceiling. And I can hear, at this point, my eyes are closed. I can't keep my eyes open. And I can hear the staff filling my room in the ER. And I have a nurse on my right putting on a blood pressure cuff and a nurse on my left placing an IV. And as I'm lying there, I'm thinking, what's taking her so long? Like, why can't she get that IV in? But my veins were collapsing because I'm now going into shock, right? So as I'm lying there, I feel like I just jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. I'm just free falling through space. And it's probably my blood pressure is just crashing at that point. And the nurse on my right yells out, 50/15, hurry, she yells in this panic voice. And that's my blood pressure. So we know now we're kind of getting below how to support a heartbeat. And it was shortly after she yelled that out that I knew that I was dying. And that is such a different experience than when I gave birth and I was in that 7.4 earthquake when I thought I was going to die, right? A lot of us have been in, almost in a car accident, almost getting run over when crossing the street, right? And you kind of say, oh my goodness, I could have died, right? But nothing happened, right? And that's one experience. But this was very different because I knew I was dying at this point. And the complete atheist that I was at the time, I said, well, I was confirmed when I was 14. I was raised in Sweden, in Northern Europe, and everybody was a Lutheran back then because the church and the state hadn't yet separated. So if you were born in Sweden, you were a Lutheran. If you didn't want to be Lutheran, you had to tell someone because it was the church that gave you the passport and kept track of all the people back then. So I said, if any of the things I learned when I was confirmed is true, this is my only chance. So I prayed to God to save my life. I pleaded, and I said, I have 3 children under the age of 6. Please let me live. They need a mother. And right after that, I got sucked out of my body. So it was like, just took a step out. And it happens very quickly. So, one instance you're in the body, the next second you are not. But it's in that state, right? I talked about it before, how there is no time. There is just unconditional love and peace in this state. But I knew I belonged to that body down on the table. Even though I didn't turn around and see my body, it was like I knew my body was there. It's like you step out of your house, you step out of your car. You know it's your car. You're in the grocery store and you got to find your car again when you go back. It's the same feeling that I just stepped out. I just stepped out of my body for a moment. So then I'm not out for very long and I get sucked back in to my body. And the next morning in the hospital, I can hear my sister-in-law, who had passed away within the last week of this. She passed away, and I can hear her in the left corner of my ceiling. And she says, everything's going to be okay. I'm thinking, this is it. Like, I have completely lost it. If I tell anybody, they're going to lock me up in the psych ward. This can't happen, right? My belief system did not support my own experience, because I didn't have a belief system in that your soul or spirit survives death, or that there is a spirit world or anything like that. So then I told my mother-in-law, and she was very spiritual, and she said, I know what happened to you. You had something called a near-death experience. And she went out and bought me the book Life After Life by Raymond Moody. And so that's how that journey began. And then I was really sick and I got bone marrow suppression. I kept getting pneumonia. I had pneumonia like once or twice a year. I couldn't literally leave my house barely for 6 years as I was struggling to heal from this bone marrow suppression. And I was getting bruises, and I put my knee on the floor to tie my children's shoes. I would get a bruise on my knee. So I became a squatter. I would squat doing anything, because anything I did would give me a bruise because I had such low platelet count. So anyways, during this healing process, and I couldn't even stand up to cook, like make pancakes for my kids. I had a stool in the kitchen by the stove so I could sit down, because I couldn't stand up, because I would literally pass out. I didn't have enough blood. So my soul always felt like it was jumping out of my body, probably because I didn't have any blood in my body, or the soul didn't merge properly when I came back. I don't know which. But it was always this struggle of me saying, no, we're not leaving. We're staying. Like, no, we can't leave. Like, your kids need you, kind of thing. So my second near-death experience happened about 2 years later. And I always say, they saved me too quickly the first time. I didn't get the full experience, because it's really a combination of the two experiences, but especially the second one that really activated my life path and what my work has become today, working as a medical medium and ancestral healer. It all really comes from this second experience. So during this second experience, I wake up in the middle of the night, like I often did. My head is pounding. I take my head off the pillow. And then again, I just get sucked out of my body, like in a split second. But this second experience is more like Star Wars. So imagine you're on a rocket ship flying through space, and it's just darkness, but I kind of feel like I'm tumbling through darkness, like put yourself in a dryer. Like I'm tumbling through darkness, through space. And I get to this place that I call the bouncing station, because they sent me back. But there was an awareness that you could, like, there were levels. Like I ended up at this level. And if you go into a skyscraper and you push the button on the 50th floor, and there's 100 floors in the skyscraper, you get off on the 50th floor, you look around, you can see all the things that are on this floor. You know that there's floors above you. You're in a skyscraper, and you know there's floors below you. You don't know what's on those floors, because you're not on those floors. You're on the 50th floor. It was that kind of a feeling. It was a feeling that you go to different levels. I don't know. Maybe there's different messages at different levels. Who knows? So here I am on the 50th floor, as I call it. And I hear the most beautiful music. And you can't make this music on the earth plane. It is too beautiful. And we had a big synthesizer at the time, probably with over 200 sounds. I tried every sound for days. Is there any sound that even comes close to the sound I heard? And there is no way to describe it, and I've heard other people talk about it too. It's more beautiful than, you can't recreate it on the earth plane, because it's more beautiful than that. But there was also something, I'm going to say, that is hauntingly familiar about the music. The melody was very simple, and I'm going to say somehow familiar. And when I came to this place, the bouncing station, I hear this beautiful music, and I'm wondering where this music is coming from. And I look to my right and I see a little log cabin, and I'm thinking the music must come from the log cabin. So I open the door, I look inside, but it's empty. So I look to my left, and it's a complete mirror image of what I'm seeing on the right. I open the door, look inside, but it's empty. But then I become aware of this growing, the brightest, whitest light you can imagine. Almost like, I always feel like it's like a fog. If you're standing outside and the fog is rolling in, that fog is coming in from, let's say, from behind you. And now imagine you put a spotlight on that fog. So the fog is really bright and white and it's rolling in, and you get completely surrounded by the fog, and you're standing in the middle of the fog. That was the experience with the light, because it completely sort of enveloped me on all sides. I was in the light, or in the fog light, completely surrounded by the light. But as I turn around and I look into the light, the music is coming from the angels, and there is an outline of angels that is in this white light. But I'm also completely aware of the fact I don't believe in angels, but now I'm experiencing angels. So if I had met my grandmother, I would never have believed in my own near-death experience. I would have explained it, saying it's some kind of a hallucination. I thought I met grandma. So I can see why I had to have experiences that I didn't believe were possible, right? So it went against all my beliefs. Right? I didn't have a belief system to support it. But the white light, right, is also the source. It is the source of who we are here as humans on earth. We come from this light. We are part of this light, and we return to this light. This light, you can call it God, you can call it source, you can call it whatever you want. This is the light that we are all part of. And the light is nothing but unconditional love, right? So all our life, it's really all about love. It's unconditional love for ourselves and for our fellow humans, because we're here, I'm going to say, to learn to love and accept and have compassion for all our fellow humans. Yeah. And as I'm standing in this light, and I'm part of the light, I have two spirit guides, one on my right and one diagonally to the left in front of me. And the one on the right says, "What is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back." As if, I'm going to say, I kind of always feel like I'm running out of time. As if you get to this level, don't stay too long, because then we can't get you back. I don't know. But there's kind of like, why did he say that? Right? So puzzling. And then the guy, when he says that to the other spirit guide, I say, no, wait a second. I've been already contemplating for 2 years how I could leave my body the first time. And here I am again, outside my body. But I'm still me. I'm still the way I feel and act in this human body. I'm still me. So I say, wait a second. How can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? And the spirit guide on my left says, if I told you, you wouldn't remember, but you will remember this. I'm going to say it's a whiteout mechanism or something. So then it's like I'm standing on the moon and I'm looking down on the earth. It's like like a movie screen kind of. And I see the earth, but around the earth is what I called the silvery, glittery fishnet. Because this is 1994. We did not have Google yet. We could not Google these things. I searched the San Francisco Public Library for a couple of years for anything that could tell me what this grid was that I had seen. So to me, it looked like a fishnet because it was diamond shaped and it was like silvery, glittery. And I grew up in Northern Europe, in Sweden, and when I was little, I would row the rowboat for my grandmother, and she laid fishnets in the ocean to catch fish for the family, because I grew up on an island in the summertime for 3 months of the year with no electricity and no running water. And my grandmother would lay the fishnets to catch fish for the family. And when you lift that fishnet out of the ocean in the early morning sun, those little water droplets sort of sparkle on that fishnet. So that was my best description. Now you can just put in Google grid around the earth and you're going to see the grid around the earth, right? We know that. But back then we didn't have Google. So, and then the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that information, I got sent back. But that is really what has activated my life path and created the understanding of how we are impacted by our ancestors in our current life, and why it's so important to create healing for yourself. Because when you create healing for yourself, you not only heal yourself, but you heal everybody that you're connected to, and that includes the people in the spirit world.
Wow.
So it is, it's become my work, what I experienced, right? And then after 12 years of hearing messages, the spirit world said, you have to go to medical school and you have to become a doctor. And so I went to medical school when I was 54 years old. And now I can see why, because now it's an integration of, is it really a true integration of science and spirituality in the work that I do? Because I have the knowledge, I have the medical knowledge that can back up when I get intuitive hits when I work with people as a medical medium.
I love that. You know, Dr. Bruce Lipton says love and fear have the opposite effect on the mind and body. So when we're living in hate, anger,
Yeah.
and resentment, um, and unresolved trauma, that has an opposite effect on the mind and body versus living on a spiritual basis, be more present, be mindful and loving. Can that create disease itself?
I think everything can create disease. I think everybody has a different life path. Does the environment impact your health? Of course it does. You could be living, even if you live in the suburban area, you might still have glyphosate in your bloodstream in high amounts, which comes from the weed killers that they put on the green belts, right? You're not even living on a farm, and then that's going to play a role in the diseases that you get, because now you have pesticides in your system. That's just like regular science knowledge, so to speak. But everything is going to affect it. So we know from Bruce Lipton, I think in his book, The Honeymoon Effect, I think it was, he talked about how he grew different cells in petri dishes, depending on the environment. He grew bone, muscle, and fat cells in petri dishes based on the environment he placed the petri dishes. And we know from, lots of different research. Masaru Emoto did all the studies on water and the water crystals. We were mostly water, right? All the different emotions and our own experiences is going to impact our health. When you go through the healing, though, right? Being the spiritual doctor when I was still in clinic, I would get patients that said, I'm very spiritual. I know I can heal this. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to pray. I'm going to do all these different things. But that's not the right thing for everybody. Some people incarnated to create healing for themselves by doing meditation and praying. Somebody else might have incarnated to heal with pharmaceutical drugs because they don't believe in pharmaceutical drugs. So in this life, they're going to heal with a pharmaceutical drug, right? Somebody else might have incarnated to, they're only going to create healing if they use pharmaceutical drugs, acupuncture, and meditation. Then the next person comes, they're only going to heal with, Chinese medicine and drinking carrot juice and pray. And right. So we go on and on and on. We don't know what everybody incarnated, what lessons they're here to learn, right? We're all on our own journey, our own path. And so when you're going through healing, don't put all your eggs in one basket thinking, I'm going to meditate this away. It might work, but it also might not, because we don't know. Maybe you incarnated to have chemotherapy in this life, and then that's going to heal you, right? So we don't know. I tell people, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Use all the resources. Do your research, figure out which plan you're going to go with, and then try and integrate as many different things as you can to create that healing path for you. Because what your sister did, or your mom, or your friend, or somebody that you read about online, that worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for you, right? So we all have our own individual paths.
Thank you. Earlier, I was going to ask you something about when a family has something that runs in the family. Like, say everyone has, a lot of women have breast cancer in the family, or there's a lot of addiction in the family. Is there a certain unresolved ancestral trauma that needs to be
I'm going to say absolutely. I feel like there's always ancestral trauma. So depending on, the breast cancer, is it because everybody has the BRCA gene? So when it comes to cancer, it's actually very little it's very little genetic influence why we get sick. I'm going to say it's a combination of the perfect storm most of the time. You might have a genetic marker that predisposes you, and then you also had the environment where it was a dysfunctional family and lots of trauma, and it creates that perfect soup for you to create that specific disease. So it's different for different people, what disease they're going to have or experience. And when you look at addiction, definitely that tends to run in families. We know that. And that is, again, an ancestral component to that. The person who grows up in that family, anything that's unresolved, the unresolved issues between mom and dad, the unresolved issues between you and dad and you and mom and you and grandma, right? All those unresolved issues gets passed down. The generation before you didn't resolve it. And so now it's in your lap, your turn. You become an alcoholic. Okay. See if okay, good. This one resolved it. All right, great. And then all of a sudden that cord is sort of cut, right? Somebody comes in and does the work and creates healing. And then the people that follow down from that generation often has already created healing for that issue. Now other issues will come up for healing. So you see it when you work in ancestral healing, you see it all the time. And many times it's even funny too, because it always starts with the mother wound. When I do ancestral healing, the mother wound, I also have a course, like a 7-hour self-study course on my website that I have taught, like for the Shift Network and other people. And it's a great course because everything starts with mom. And even when we say, my mom was great. I love my mom. It was the best mom. I had one of those moms. And I love my mom. My mom was great. I couldn't have asked for a more nurturing mom. Did I have a mother wound even though I said that? Of course I did. It's just more hidden. When we have a mom that is dysfunctional or yelling at you, you weren't connected to them, or they had alcoholic, issues or drug issues, we know that we have a mother wound because mom couldn't be there, and it's written on the wall. But when we have a mom that was very nurturing, I'm going to say the problems are just more hidden because, number one, why would we incarnate to have a mother that we weren't going to learn something from? There's always a lesson to be learned. Anyway, so that I have a 7-hour course on my website. You go to School of Divine Spiritual Lessons on my website. And if you use the code Blueprint30, so Blueprint30, it will give you a nice discount. I believe it's like 30% off. So you can always use that code. You can put that in your podcast notes as well.
Awesome.
But that is a fantastic course because it takes you through all the different layers. So the first couple of modules, I tell you, just sit back and listen. Just get a cup of coffee or tea or something and just listen. And then, like when we get kind of maybe a third of the way, I say, all right, it's time for you to resolve one of your mother wounds. And I will guide you through, different writing exercises as we go along. I'll say, stop the video right now, write this down, what comes to mind. And then in the last module, we'll do like a master healing ceremony to release all those things that came up as you were watching and writing things down, as I'm bringing things up. And I give you lots of examples of different things that you might be experiencing to jog people's memories and saying, oh, wow, yeah, I do have that. Okay, I'm going to write that on my list. Right. And then at the end, we create a master healing ceremony. And so that is something, that is kind of, who I am. I'm here to bring healing. I'm trying to help people heal. And it all begins with our mom because that's the first, we came from mom. We spent 9 months in mom's womb. And when we came out, that was the first person we saw. And that egg that you came from, your mom made that egg when she was a 20-week-old fetus in your grandmother's womb. So what went on in your grandmother's life when your mom was a 20-week-old fetus in your grandmother's womb? What epigenetics was coded down? What trauma did she experience? What did my mom then bring into the world and she didn't resolve? And then I grew up, I had my own experiences combined with what my mom didn't resolve, and it all falls back on you. So wow. That is something that also is a fantastic healing journey for people who are ready to do that.
That's amazing. Going back to the mother womb, Gabor shows studies that were researched about young pups, little rat pups that weren't licked properly. or enough when they were
Yeah.
a pup by their mother, and how they became more prone to becoming an addict or an alcoholic,
Yeah.
which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we are human beings and we need connection. And so even, you were left in the crib to cry, depending on how old you are, right? But back in the day, in the 1940s, was it or something? Dr. Spock was the one
Yeah,
who
yeah.
ruled, and he was like,
'60s.
you should just leave your baby to cry, and you're spoiling your baby if you pick it
Wow.
up, right? Which is completely the opposite of what we know now. It's the infant needs the infant is dependent on the mother to regulate its own nervous system, because as infants we co-regulate with mom. And so if mom is sad, baby cries. If mom is happy, baby's happy, right? We co-regulate. The baby is dependent on the mother's nervous system to regulate their own nervous system. So absolutely everything we experience. And, where was our mom at when we were born? Was she sick? Was she depressed? Did she have to go back to work right away? Was she abandoned by your dad? I mean, there's so many different scenarios, right? That happens. You were sent off to live with grandma and grandpa. As an infant, you might have been cared for, but as an infant, you're still going to say, hey, what happened to mom? Where is she? I spent 9 months in this womb and here I am. So all these different things create mother wounds. Just even the separation. You were in ICU as a child. Mom was in ICU. And it's that separation in many different ways that we break that bond with mom, where mom wasn't able to give you the love, just like the pups that weren't licked. She was dealing with too much trauma in her own life, and she wasn't available. You might have been child number 8, right? Any child that's born after child number 6 automatically has a mother wound because mom can't be there. Mom is not an octopus, right? She only has 2 arms. So it's like it becomes lack of caring in many ways. So, many times those children sort of raise themselves to get raised by the older siblings,
So
but there
would you
still becomes a mother wound.
hmm. So would you say like spirituality is about really, I always say spirituality is taking responsibility for your own thoughts, your own life. And
Hmm.
but then would you call that also you help people reparent themselves to heal?
I mean,
Do you
in a
use that
sense,
term?
yeah, I mean, in a sense, you are, right? You're reparenting yourself. You weren't parented by your parents, right? So but you're healing those wounds. You create an understanding of what happened. And when we do a healing, we not only heal ourselves, but we send healing to our ancestors.
Mm,
Even if they weren't nice to you, we're still going to send them healing because we can now understand and see who they are and where they came from. Right? So a mother that doesn't know how to mother, she probably wasn't mothered herself.
I
She
love
doesn't
that.
know how to mother you.
Mm. I remember telling Eben Alexander about when I went through the 12 steps, you hear about the near death life review.
Yeah.
And I said I experienced that in the fourth step when I went through the 12 steps, and no one told me to do this way. I heard someone that gave me the idea,
Hmm.
but they didn't exactly explain it this way. But I put myself on stage with the person that I resented, and I replayed the scene, and I sat in
Hmm.
the audience pretending there's an audience. So I was
Hmm.
able to look at it from an entirely different angle where I
Hmm.
started to look through the lens of the heart versus the conditioned,
Yeah.
unhealthy ego when you're unaware of it, right? And
Hmm.
so I went and started, instead of speaking victimese, I looked at it through just understanding and awareness and
Hmm.
question to see where I was hurt, threatened, and where I put up a persona. When I
Hmm.
started to replay that stuff, it's like the life review, and I seen how it affected me, and I seen how it affected that person and the world
Hmm.
around me. And it
Hmm.
really gave me compassion, like just a deep sense of understanding. And
Hmm.
like you hear people say, I need to forgive myself, but I didn't need to forgive myself because I understood. I seen it. I went from being it to seeing it, and
Hmm.
healing became just automatic for me.
Yeah. And it's very much like ancestral healing. It's creating the awareness of why things happen and why we had those experiences and why it is we're experiencing some hardships today. And once you create that awakening, right, we raise our consciousness and we create an awareness, but it's through that awareness that we create healing. Just like
Mm,
you did. You created that awareness. You could see it. You had compassion.
yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember thinking like, well, I had all this stuff happen to me, all these secrets, all this stuff that
Mm-hmm.
affected me and my brain development and fogged up my window of perception. Maybe that's happened the same thing with my mother and my father, and I don't know what they've been through. All that just created this like compassion. for the
Yeah.
human experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a beautiful process.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, it really is. Once we can take a step back and get a little bit of a bird's eye view, we can see the bigger picture. But once we do that, we can also create healing. I think everybody can create healing. It's just a matter of walking the path.
Can I ask you one more question about trauma really quick?
Hmm.
How does trauma affect our nervous system, and how do we kind of calm our any practices to calm our nervous system and heal how help our nervous system heal?
Right. So there's a great book by Stephen Porges called Our Polyvagal World. And um, it's fascinating because, once we experience trauma, it's like we get stuck in that. So they talk in his book, he talks about the green zone, the yellow zone, and the red zone. And we want to be in the green zone where we're feeling happy and calm, right? And then we have the yellow zone, which is kind of the fight or flight. And then we have the
Mhm.
red zone where something terrible is happening. We're literally in shutdown mode. So, there's many different things that we can do to create healing or to calm the nervous system. And there are many different polyvagal techniques that we can do. I'm going to say one of my favorite ones, which is super easy, is just to put your hands on your heart. And when you put your hands on your heart, you just keep them there for a while. It's an automatic response, right? Because your body is very smart. And so it
Mm,
creates a physiological response where you're just calming your nervous system. And this is polyvagal theory that comes from Stephen Porges and his work. But I love how simple things are sometimes. Another one that I love that they also teach in polyvagal theory is the ear pull, and you pull on your ears like a little monkey, and you pull, on your earlobes and your ears, and you pull them up. And when you do this, and I did this, I laugh because there's so many pictures of me as a child, and I'm like being a little monkey pulling on my ears. And now, I mean, I realized that I probably was just calming my nervous system all those times. I love to be the monkey, and that was my go-to. Like I would be a monkey. But now I also realize that I calm my nervous system by doing that because that is, again, polyvagal theory. So if you just pull on your ears like that, it has a very calming effect on your nervous system.
wow.
So there, people can just Google different things like that, but it's so simple. It's so simple to bring calm. And I'm going to say there's so much anxiety in the world today. And I feel like, was there this much anxiety 30, 40 years ago? Or is this just because the world is more crazy and we're bombarded with more news? I mean, when I grew up, there was one TV station. The news was on. It's from 6 to 6:30, and that was it. That was all the news we got. And it was whatever they decided to show you in those 30 minutes. But now we're bombarded by social media and podcasts. Like it's everywhere. And we know what's going on across the world and who died in that windstorm in India, right? So we get bombarded with news all the time. And I think that also, it's a good thing that we are connecting throughout the world. But I think sometimes it also can create more anxiety in people.
Mm, thank you. You ever trip out on the Bhagavad Gita? You've ever read the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu scripture?
No, but I know about it.
Well, the Bhagavad Gita means the song of God, and you talked about
Hmm.
the music,
Hmm.
and inside the Gita, it talks a lot about how we don't die.
Yeah.
You can't wet it, you can't burn it. The true
Hmm.
self, who we really are, you can't kill
Yeah.
us. It's just a beautiful verse, and that reminded me of your story a little bit with the music you talked
Hmm.
about. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find when people tell me that, and it is fascinating. That was, but that's who we are. We are, we don't die. It's just a body. It's just this bodysuit we're in. The body, I mean, your car dies, your phone dies, your computer dies, everything, right? Your bodysuit dies and you get a new one. You come back in a new car, in the new bodysuit. But you're still you, right? And you're going through life and, um, it's like you get upgrades each life. Oh, I mastered this in this life. I'm going back and, now I'm going to be at 2.8 and then I come back, I'm at 3.1. I mean, it literally feels like that. And, as we go through life, I'm going to say it's like you get upgrades, when we resolve things and we create healing and now we can communicate with that person we haven't communicated with before. It's like we upgraded our software. So, now instead of being at 3.4, we're at 3.6, right? And so with each notch we climb and each things we resolve, each thing we create healing for, it's like we get a new software upgrade, and all of a sudden we awaken a new level, right? We get new experiences. We look at things differently, just like the computer upgrade. Now the computer is smarter. It knows how to do this now because we did an upgrade. But we're not very different, right? We learn as we go along. We sort of upgrade our software.
Mm. Do you ever look back in tears of joy and gratitude, looking back at your past experiences?
Oh yeah, many times. Many times. Yeah. Because you become so grateful for everything that has happened, even the bad things, right?
Yeah.
Your hardships, the things that you went through, because it made you who you are today. Without those
Yeah.
experiences, my soul wouldn't have grown to what it has grown to. I needed those experiences to become who I am today and to help other people.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I asked you that question because that happens to me a lot as well. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
appreciate you
absolutely.
coming on. Do you have any last words? Anything you would like to say that you weren't able to talk about?
I'm going to say, everybody remember that we are all one. We are all connected. And it is all divine. And so are all of you. So everybody, take that to heart and know that you're not alone in this world. We're all connected.
I love that. And one thing I love talking about is reincarnation. I
Mm,
like talking about our interconnectedness, our oneness, because if we actually remember that and understand
mm,
reincarnation, maybe the hate, the anger, the
uh-huh.
disconnection, or the racism would kind of lower. I know we need a little
Mm.
bit of that to continue to grow, but maybe it wouldn't be so toxic in today's
Yeah.
society.
I think we're going through that right now, and hopefully the good will win and we will become more compassionate human beings. Because that's who we truly are. We are compassionate. And we can see that when accidents happen, all of a sudden, right? Somebody is in a burning car, or the helicopter crash, right? That happened a few days ago. And people just rush to the rescue to help these people. We don't know who is inside the
Mm.
burning car. We don't know who is inside the helicopter that crashed. And all of us come together as human beings, regardless of race and political beliefs, to help this person in need. And when we come together as a group, and that is what we need to do more, right? We need to, because we are compassionate human beings, and we all need that interconnectedness, and we all need each other, regardless of, we have to learn to overcome our differences. That's why we're here. So hopefully, we'll be creating a better world where there's more love and more gratitude and more compassion for the human race.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm going to end it with the John Lennon quote. John Lennon said, "I'm not afraid of death because I don't believe in it. It's just getting out of one car and out the other." When you were talking, I go, I got to look up that quote, get that quote.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know you saw that.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. I'd love to
Yeah,
have you
thank you for
back.
having me. My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Namastizzle.
Namaste.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.